Hello and welcome to the Hash Rugby Chat. Are you fit and proper? Yes, that is what we're going to be talking about today. Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind Driving More, your best pleasure predictions and opinion. And you know what? We have taken the step and we have taken Hash Rugby Chat and moved it over to New Zealand Sports Radio. Yes, it is the first week. It might be episode 137, but it's the first episode on New Zealand Sport Radio, which is fantastic. And joining me this evening is Arswin. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm not too bad.
He's surprised he's there. And Stephen, how you doing?
Very good, thank you, Paul. Privilege and a pleasure to be on the show again.
Thank you, guys. And yes, and as Stephen says, Paul, yes, well, congratulations. You're very prepared tonight. It's like, no, we went to sleep 5 minutes ago. It's been a long day. I've done 3 interviews. I've got another interview after this show as well, and I've put out 2 shows. So yes, it has been absolutely crazy getting this New Zealand Sport Radio up and running, but it's been all great fun. So guys, Arswin, yes, you managed to get through the whole of this morning's the morning sports briefing, not realised I even talked about this letter that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I was conversing with people in our chat room while you were reading the rugby news. So absolutely, I was like, "Ooh, look, this is rather big," and something a bit different from just COVID. So yeah, no, the letter from Daniel Leo and let's see, make sure I get the organisation that he represents, the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare management team, I suppose you'd call it, and
association, I think is what you call it.
But they sort of basically got about 700 players under their sort of umbrella. I wouldn't say they're management of 700 players, but they're sort of like a union, aren't they?
Yes, but they're not the union, because the union is called the Pacific Rugby Players, not Pacific Rugby Players Welfare. Now, and I interviewed Junior Fasiolova from the Pacific Rugby Players. So the other day. So if you want to have a look at that, check out the Facebook page or the podcast and have a look at the long chat with Junior Fasiolova. But yeah, so shall I start reading it? You think the letter, or do one of you guys want to be the narrator?
I think Steve's our awesome narrator if he's got the letter in front of it.
Well, I have in a moment. Just basically trying to decipher a lot of it myself as I pretty much blow it up. And he obviously spent a little bit of time on the letter, and obviously a lot of his concerns is in and around a certain Mr. Francis Keane, who's the Fijian representative, and I'm pretty sure we'll spend a little bit more time on it. But listen, I'll get through the first part of it. Obviously, he's writing to the World Rugby Council now. Just getting into the crux of it, Pacific Rugby Players Welfare is an independent, non-for-profit organisation that supports professional and semi-professional players of Pacific heritage in the UK and Europe. We have around 700 members, about a third whom come from Fiji. Silence towards figures or authority is a big part of the culture in the developing world, including the Pacific. That said, it's not easy to write that letter, and I've got to say, that's really a common theme with even the Pacific community in New Zealand. Sometimes they're more likely to basically stand back and pretty much get on it. But for what it's worth, just in the letter, officials in Dublin make out that they are in an apparent state of shock at information about Francis Bulewa Keane, aka Ratu Bulewa Francis Frederick Keane, that has been in plain sight all along. Following revelations in the Sunday Times, an urgent investigation has promised into his candidacy, and PW is independent, takes no funding from World Rugby, and has no partnership agreements with any member union. It falls to us to speak truth to those in power about Francis Keane. If the values of World Rugby really are integrity, respect, solidarity, passion, and discipline, all of this, and the claim to have been building character since 1823 will be utterly debased if Ken is elected to the Exco. It is simple as that.
Let's just come in there and have a quick chat about that, because integrity, respect, solidarity, passion, and discipline. Now, we've already kind of had a chat about or I kind of mentioned it on the morning sports briefing a couple of days ago about this, about the kind of integrity, respect, and solidarity. Now, before this letter even came out, we already knew that Keane had been involved in manslaughter and had then gone off and had 3 months in jail for that. Now, 3 months for manslaughter, geez. And we'll hear even more about it in here. We'll actually go into some details of what happened about it, which is amazing. But you got to say the way that there's been that Beaumont has had the Fijian one already raised eyebrows. The way that Pichot went about and said, and Argentina decided they would drop their 2027 bid for the Rugby World Cup, and in return, Australia suddenly are seconding Pichot's chairmanship. This whole integrity around this whole process has been, let's be honest, a little bit questionable. And let's be honest, and when John comes on, he always complains about the fact that the reason that France or got the 2023 Rugby World Cup is that he reckons that the European nations will all be getting games for that, which they're not. But you can see for a number of years there's been question marks around the kind of the integrity of how the voting comes about in this one, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, like that's the key to the. Yeah, who are we throwing to?
They've all fallen asleep. It's amazing. Brilliant.
But it comes to the key of it, isn't it? It's like operating an organization with integrity, and it starts to be questioned when you've got, as you've alluded to, not just around what's happening in this environment, in this situation, which we're talking about tonight predominantly, but other actions that have gone on in the past. And it's just like, you're not very open and transparent if you're having these sorts of things going on, and they seem to be escalating.
Yeah, Paul, I think we'll get into the crux of exactly what we're actually we are talking about now. Keane, who was a New Zealand citizen living in Fiji, took a citizen living in Fiji. I'll actually go back again and start again where I basically left off. You have thought as Pacific Islands we would fall in line to put in some support of Keane, but it's extraordinary to anyone involved in the game of the Pacific that Keane is even on the ballot. His time in office has a byword for intimidation, vindictiveness, corruption, self-dealing, nepotism, and the threat of realisation of violence. This all conducted in plain sight. A New Zealand citizen living in Fiji took her own life in November 2015 after a run-in with Keane when she tried to open a rugby academy. At the time, Fiji at least had 3 rugby academies operated by top French 14 clubs approved by Keane that were also in breach of World Rugby Regulation 4. One French Rugby Union board member operated openly as a player agent specialising in taking players to France. Rugby World September 2015. Fighting spirit, the problems Fiji must overcome. Now, it just shows you there's obviously a huge, he's obviously getting a bit of support from France at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's some, well, by the sound, it's some cash backhanders probably as well to operate those. And he's also, Laporte has also come out and mentioned in relatively recently that suggesting that Fiji could join the Six Nations, which playing their games out of in France, which is just, well, very, very questionable. And you got to say, when it now when we're coming down to voting, you can perhaps see why those sort of things he's been making those sort of comments.
Yeah, look, I mean, when you look, there's so much to unpack out of this letter. You know, you're just alluding to the French collusion, for want of a term, and it's like what's happening with what France is doing in Fiji goes against the constitution of World Rugby. So basically, just to go over it again, is you've got a French setting up multiple academies in Fiji, with the view of assisting the development of Fijian rugby players, and out of those academies, then basically pinching the kids at an early age, sending them over to France, so that the real top players can then become part of the French system early enough to then become French eligible to become French players. Again, totally against the constitutional agreement, documents of World Rugby, IRB. As I said, that's one of the things. I mean, we'll go into this a bit later, but I've just brought up in front of me within a few seconds what the charges against Francis Keane were, or the court case against him, etc. And even within the court case, there were elements which are questionable in the way that the trial was conducted. So, look, it's just so much to unpack from this one letter.
Yeah, but we do know that we've had a military coup in Fiji. We know a lot of people in the military are banned from traveling to New Zealand and Australia. So look, we know that the goings on domestically are dodgy.
Above board,
are not all above board. It's a matter of how much of that do we go into, and how much do we kind of stick with some of the more rugby related bits.
Look, I agree with you. I mean, we're a rugby show, so we stick with the rugby. But the problem here is the fact is that, today, Daniel Leo is asking the question: how can somebody's nomination be accepted when they've got this baggage? And that's why I think it's just so that people can get an understanding of why is Daniel making a big point of this individual. And why is he questioning, how he's got to this position of being a nominee, to be at the highest level of World Rugby, and you'll be having the people that'll be listening today thinking, well, what's this guy done? And I think it's just for completeness, it's about knowing what the backstory is so that you can understand why Daniel Leo is rather upset and justifiably so with what's going on.
Yep. Stephen, do you want to take us through the next revelation bit?
Yeah, the next part of the letter, which I'll pull up again, and just for those who are tuning into this special edition on New Zealand Sports Radio, I've just posted that link on the Facebook site, so have a look, and that might save me reading out the whole letter.
You read it so well, Stephen. Yeah. You read it so well.
Yeah. Well, where I pretty much sort of cut myself off. Apparently, Julian Alexander received a letter from Keane on the 24th of November, quoting World Rugby Regulation 4 and demanding immediately stop your misleading representations and the operation of your rugby academy in Fiji, complaining that Fiji's regime was trying to cut off her internet, her social media. Now, this is obviously the young lady who took her own life on the November 27th, and off to bed now. See you tomorrow. And tomorrow, if I'm not murdered in my sleep, she admitted to hospital the next day and passed away on November the 29th. A source close to the family has since informed me that her state of mind was deeply affected by Keane's standover tactics, reputation, and violence. Furthermore to that incident, which we'll get into shortly, I mean, it's always sad, for an organisation even like World Rugby or all parties involved, when there's suicide involved, really and truthfully, I'm just asking the question: where's the compassion here, or the empathy at least shown? Somebody who was so passionate about what she was doing. I think you've got to look into that, surely.
Well, absolutely, and secondly is actually it doesn't say it was necessarily suicide. It says just that she was admitted into hospital. Was she beaten up overnight? What actually happened to her? We don't know. And even if we look at the official reports, we probably don't. From what we've read in this letter, we're not sure we could trust the official reports anyway. So just because, it may not have been suicide, it may have been murder. but we'll never. We're not likely to ever know that side of things. But clearly he has this person has a reputation. I'll take on then would allow his nomination to be seconded by the Fiji Rugby Union, which the man known in his own country as Killer Keane runs in the manner of an executive chairman. So I find myself asking the obvious question: why does World Rugby have some of the most elaborate and exhaustive eligibility checks for those who play the game, but apparently no checks for someone wanting to run the game, even when that person couldn't get a visa to watch Fiji at the opening match of the 2015 Rugby World Cup or the 2018 Rugby World Cup Sevens because of his criminal record for violent killing. By the way, to get around the immigration checks of World Rugby member unions, including Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the Schengen territories, Canada, and the USA, where Fiji citizens who have served jail sentences for violent killing would expect visa applications to be automatically rejected, Keane now travels on a 10-year diplomatic passport. And he gives us the number there as well. That Keane even holds a diplomatic passport is a breach of the Fiji government's own protocols and the Vienna Convention, and should be of concern to you if your country requires a pre-approved visa for Fiji citizens. The diplomatic passport also contains different names to those on Keane's passport at the time he was jailed in 2007. So not only has this guy done some, or has been allegedly involved in some dodgy things already, on top of what he has been actually convicted of doing, he's also carrying a passport that, as you'll find out later, as the head of the Ministry Prison Service, why would you need, or why should you have a diplomatic passport to travel around the world? You're not a diplomat. It's just crazy. So clearly he's got that because he's the brother-in-law of the president, and that's the only reason he's got it.
Basically,
it pretty much sounds that way. It's very suspect. I know here in New Zealand sometimes, especially our media come down pretty hard on the New Zealand Rugby Football Union for not always supporting Pacific Island rugby. But if you kind of look at some of their history in terms of administration, we spoke off here about why Tonga doesn't get a vote at in terms of World Cup, or even voting for a new chairman. And we know the issues that even Samoa have had in the past, and unfortunately this is just another example of some of these Pacific Island teams not having their house in order. I've just got to do a bit of a shout out to Stefan Minton, who is tuning into the show. Stefan, I chat to a little bit. He's had a bit to do with rugby down in the South Auckland area, especially out in those South Auckland clubs, Manukau especially. And I know he's had quite a bit to do with a lot of prominent Pacific Island footballers over the years. So good to have you on board, Stefan.
It'd be interesting to see what Stefan's thoughts are, just to pop in some comments while he's listening and watching on the developments over the last couple of days with this letter.
So I'll take us through the next bit, which is going to be about so reporting in the Sunday Times doesn't even come close to capturing the full brutality of what Keane and his brother-in-law, Fiji's Prime Minister Frank
Bainimarama,
thank you, and FRU president, who happens to be president of the have inflicted both on the game of rugby in Fiji and those rugby officials who dared to oppose them. And Keane's spilling of blood is both personal and professional in his role of Commissioner of Prisons, and stretches back to 2006 to just this past week. Old blood. So this is the New Zealand judge who tried Keane in October 2007 ruled that Keane had murderous intent when he killed John Whippy. So why was Keane not convicted of murder in October 2007, and when that was what Keane was originally charged with into January 2007? Keane took the opportunity to plead guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter in an offer made by the state prosecutors, who, by October 2007, were now firmly in the control of the military regime headed by Keane's brother-in-law. Now, you could argue that sometimes people do plea bargain to get lower things, but it does in this case, as we'll go on, you'll see that it's perhaps not as legitimate as it could sometimes. The judge, Gerald Winter, left Fiji soon after the trial. his car having been sabotaged in such a way as to cause a serious accident. Another judge, Briton Sir Gordon Ward, head of Fiji's Court of Appeal, had his home burnt down just before Keane's trial. So clearly, I'm not sure intimidation is a hard enough word here. Really, I mean, burning someone's house down is, to me, goes a bit beyond intimidation. But clearly, they decided that they would give him the take the much easier of the two things, and then he was released after 3 months anyway of serving jail term. And this is a person who was, as I say, was standing. A new blood just this weekend. 4 of Keane's police officers were charged in relation to the death earlier this week by brutal, blunt force trauma of a prisoner in a remand centre. 2 officers face counts of murder and others of assault. Keane has served as Commissioner of Prisons since 2016, and the forces under his control became a byword for state-sanctioned violence. So let's go on from that. The bit that was also covered in that that Times article is around the next piece in here, where it says the Sunday Times referenced a well-known recording of Keane shouting violent and homophobic instructions to his police officers, whipping them into committing beatings. So clearly, look, his officers have committed a murder at the weekend, or have killed somebody at the weekend. Whether it's murder or not, we'll have to wait for the trial, innocent until proven guilty, and all that kind of stuff. But clearly, that's an issue. There's a culture of silence in Fiji and rugby, unsurprisingly, because you just quickly paraphrase this last bit. There's a quote in Ben Ryan's book of Keane turning up with 2 uniformed soldiers and telling Ben Ryan that these guys would train with the Fijian Sevens, of which Ben Ryan let them do so, obviously, because he knew there was no point standing up to him. So that just basically, and that's just goes on to say, why would this person be basically allowed into it? I think that covers most of his criminalization that he's and dodgy behavior that he's been involved with. So you just got to question, why is there no fair and proper checks of people? And when this first came out, World Rugby came out and said, "Look, he is not the Fijian Rugby Union who have seconded for Bill Beaumont." It's like, well, he's their representative at council, and you're trying to say that he isn't part of that. And then yes, you got to question, why did France second the nomination of him to be into the executive committee? There is breaking news that I'll read out. This came out about 4 minutes before the show started, so Alston and Stephen probably haven't come across this yet. World Rugby notes that Fiji Rugby Union's decision to stand down Fiji Rugby Union chairman Ratu Vilikesa-Bulawayo Francis Keane from the World Rugby Council, and therefore withdrawing his candidature from the World Rugby Executive Committee, following new allegations published in the UK Sunday Times. Well, they don't sound that new. World Rugby takes all allegations of behaviour that is not in keeping with the sport's strong and inclusive values and bylaws extremely seriously. Really. While it's important to stress that any allegations must be validated. So, I mean, they're already now backtracking on saying, hey, this guy's a naughty guy. Following dialogue with World Rugby, the Fijian Rugby Union recognises the seriousness of the allegations made and the need for them to be fully investigated. And that is in the best interest of the sport that Mr. Keane step down from the council and his executive committee candidate should be withdrawn. The Fiji Rugby Union have confirmed that their seat on the World Rugby Council will be filled by Union CEO John O'Connor.
Hey?
Wow. What? Wow.
Get a phone call out, quick.
Yeah, get a phone
What's
call
John been up to? I think it may be a different John O'Connor to the one that's on the station several times. There are now 7 nominations for 7 seats on the World Rugby Executive Committee, which will be confirmed at the 2020 annual meeting of the World Rugby Council held at a teleconference on the 12th of May. Yeah, I mean, if there is as softly a word, a press release as can be worded, well, that's pretty much it, isn't it? We don't want to upset him because, hey, he's one of the part of the in crowd. He's actually, and you got to say, World Rugby really are pussyfooting around this one.
No, what you're trying to say? World Rugby has dropped the ball.
They have clang, yes.
It's a clanger in front of the posts.
Hey guys! I was going to say I've just googled John O'Connor and he's an optometrist, so maybe he's the guy. Listen, in summary, listen, there's more red flags here than what turns out to watch Mate Tonga in the rugby league when they get their crowds turn up. It's just, it's to me, it's something very, very fishy about this. But sounds like we're heading in the right direction, fellas. But
what you raised, Steve, is a good point, and what we sort of alluded to right back at the beginning of the show today is the what's going on at the top levels of World Rugby. How are we going to be, we all talk about the fact that the structure of rugby has to change with the pandemic going around the world at the moment. It's a great time to change it. But now we look at things, when you got to look at it, there's obviously a inner ring up at World Rugby, and how are things going to change for the better when you've got these sorts of things going on? They're trying to now obviously come out and saying, oh, this is a bad guy, and he's been withdrawn by the Fiji Rugby Union, etc., etc. What was he doing there in the first place? And how do you know what the caliber of the people that are still there is?
He's been a bad guy since 2006 on record. Now, and I'm guessing, now, shock horror, this may not be true, folks. I'm guessing he wasn't an angel before 2006 either. Just a guess. Yeah. But I could be wrong. But yeah. So clearly, look, this guy. When you've got papers, and let's be clear, the stuff in the Herald, Eastern Herald, are basically what they've been cutting staff recently. They don't have time to do massive amounts of research, and yet within hours of this guy getting nominated for the World Rugby Executive Council, Stuff have an article out there talking about the manslaughter charge, or manslaughter, not charge, well, manslaughter conviction he got.
Conviction, yeah.
So if they can find it within hours of him being nominated, it's been pretty much public knowledge for the last 14 years.
Well, look, at any level of any organisation, when you're having this sort of, a board of directors type scenario, when you get your nominations put forward, surely the first thing you do is you do your vetting process. It's like a job interview, isn't it? And you're doing a vetting process to think what's going to come up to bite this organisation in the butt before we allow this nomination to proceed. And so you have to ask the question. There's so many questions to ask, but the predominant question to ask is that what process has been gone through to analyze, if that's the right word, the caliber of the individual and whether they're actually fit for purpose for your organisation.
I find the silence by World Rugby at this time deafening, fellas. Seriously.
Yep. Yeah, clearly there's no vetting at all of people. Now, I did a piece for Supporters Only, looking at who had all the votes and how I think they're going to go. So if you want to have a look at that, you can go watch that video. But if we run through the countries, and because actually one of the points you made earlier was who else is on that board that is potentially dodgy. If we go through the countries, Argentina, well, at least they don't have the military dictatorship they used to have, where they used to fly airplanes over the sea and just throw people into the sea. So
hey, hang on, you have to be careful because you were on the other side of that war.
They are. Argentina has improved a lot, and they're in a much better place. So we're not talking about a regime in the same way I was talking about Fiji. Australia, England, France, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, Scotland. Again, amongst that kind of crowd, you're talking pretty strong democracies that are unlikely to have. South Africa, yes, there's on the whole, there's obviously some accusations in that area. Wales, Japan, Canada, again, strong democracies. You'd expect the candidates are going to be fairly. I mean, are going to be, whilst they might be corrupt, you'd expect them not to be violent. Georgia, question marks there. Fiji, obviously we know there's question marks. Samoa, not to the they don't have not to the same extent as Fiji by any stretch of imagination. Romania, I'm not sure the political state in Romania at the moment. USA, you do look at the USA and quite raise your eyebrows, don't you? But again, strong democracy. The person here should be okay. Uruguay, I'm not sure about the political situation in Uruguay, and then you got the regional things. So there are ones that.
Just butting in there for a sec, Paul. Simon in the old chat room saying that Romania might be one of the ones that you want to sort of be looking at closely as well.
From a corruption point of view, yes. I mean, there's a few here you'd want to look at from a corruption point of view, put bluntly.
Yep.
I mean, we've talked about before. Samoan players have talked about not getting paid or not having or losing training kit. But they haven't talked about being beaten. I guess is the difference here. I think there's a number of countries here you'd look at and you think, okay, corruption-wise, probably an issue, or possibly an issue. Whereas violence, I think on the whole, most of these places I would not expect. They don't have the same military dictatorship in the way that Fiji has.
Fiji does. Yep.
So I think on the whole, we probably do not have people of such level. Now, if we were talking about people from Iraq during Saddam Hussein's thing, then I'd say, oh yes, there's a dodgy one. Or if we were looking at if Iran was in the list, you might want to say, okay, what have they got up to back home? But so the rest of those nations aren't really military dictatorships in the same kind of way as Fiji.
You haven't. I know you did that in your show, but or in a previous show, but you haven't got the votes that each nation has in front of you by any chance, have you, Paul?
Yes, I do.
Oh yeah. Do you want to read those out? Because I think that'd be quite interesting for people to understand. You know, outside of this, obviously there's been other issues in the last sort of 12 months. One being like the plans to move to a World Rugby type schedule, or and or tournament even, and how that wasn't going to work because of where you have to get the votes from. So I think it'd be interesting for people to understand who has how many votes.
Sure. Okay, so the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship teams, so those 10 teams get 3 votes each. So that's 30 votes of the 51 that are available. So straight away, you have to get Tier 1 people voting for you. Otherwise, you can't pass a motion. Japan then have 2 votes. They're the only country with 2 votes. Then Canada, Georgia, Fiji, Samoa, Romania, USA, and Uruguay all have 1 vote. You'll notice there that we're talking about countries that are, and I went through this in detail, but basically you have to have been at 2 Rugby World Cups and have audited accounts. So hence Russia, who was at the last Rugby World Cup, have only been to 1. They weren't at the previous one because it was Romania. Tonga and Namibia, I'm assuming, don't have the audited accounts and have the various other pieces of good and proper requirements to get governance to get in there. Now, somehow Fiji do, interestingly enough, but so clearly those governance checks aren't watertight by any stretch. But Tonga and Namibia don't have those.
I think a lot of the governance accounting or review, I can't think of the right word, but is mainly around the financials of the organization. So I think as long as your financials stack up and they're above board, then that's pretty much most of the governance check that they carry out.
Also you've got to be within good standing with the IOC and a couple of other things. But yes, on the whole, you're right. A lot of it's about that. So amongst those nations, there's 9 votes amongst Tier 2 nations. And then finally, there each of the regions, so Europe, South America, America's North, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, those 6 areas get 2 votes each. So the further 12 votes there as well.
So if you're looking, there's 2 votes for Oceania, So effectively, with 3 for Australia, 3 for New Zealand, 6, and then 2 for Oceania. I mean, obviously that includes a Fiji and a Samoa as well, but you're basically looking at 10 votes there across the Australia, New Zealand.
Yep.
Yep, that'd be sort of just so people understand how that sort of can work and add together.
So from if we're looking at it from that point of view, so Oceania, along with Australia, New Zealand, Fiji and Samoa, get you up to 10. In Asia, they've got 4, which is the 2 for Asia, 2 for Japan. Down in Africa, it's 5, 3 for South Africa, 2 for Africa. South America is the 2 for South America, 3 for Argentina, and 1 for Uruguay, so 6. North America, USA, Canada, plus 2 there, so that's 4. And then the rest are in Europe, so which is the 6 nations times 3, which is 18, plus Georgia and Romania, 20, 22 when you add Europe in as well. So that's the biggest block by some margin. Yeah.
Guys, if I can just cut in just a quick bit of research that I've done. As of May 18th, 2019, John Massey O'Connor was the Chief Executive Officer of the Fiji Rugby Union. So you do wonder if, once again, even though Keane has been pushed out, if this is just a straight replacement with maybe one guy who's already been pointed in a certain direction.
I suppose the only benefit out of that is not benefit, if not really the right word, but is the fact is that he won't be one of the nominees for the executive board or the executive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, look, clearly he's a stooge of the president of Fiji. Look, you're not going to be. The only question is, does he actually physically have blood in his hands? He's clearly going to be. He's clearly got to, at the very, very least, turn a blind eye to what the regime do, if not actually physically, if not actively get involved himself to be nominated by Fiji. Let's be honest. Just so you know, where those where the 7 people from the executive committee will be. It will be Mark Alexander of South Africa, Khalid Babu from Rugby Africa. So there'll be 2 from Africa. Bart Campbell from New Zealand, and Brett Robinson from Australia. So 2 from Oceania. Then there'll be Gerald Davis from Wales and John Jeffrey from Scotland. So 2 from Europe, and then the final one will be Bob Latham from the USA. So they will all be rubber stamped, because there's 7 people for 7 places. I mean that South America and Asia will be the 2 regions that don't have representation at that level.
Crikey, sounds like we need to do you could do a 4-hour show just on the structure of World Rugby. Trying to understand the ins and outs of it.
Look, my one looking at the voting. I'm not an expert on rugby politics. I keep an eye on it. I probably know a little bit more than most people, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of imagination. But I guess so for me, what the immediate thing that jumps out here is that if Augustin Pichot doesn't get the chairmanship, there'll be no representation at all from South America, which would be which is a little bit surprising. It's a surprise they haven't put one person forward at least for the executive committee. Now, Argentina on the whole votes along with its Sanzar partners of South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. They as a 4, they often vote as a bloc. They pretty much always do. Japan, on the other hand, has stepped out. Doesn't follow that same line. They voted for France for the 2027 Rugby World Cup, for example. Sorry, 2023 Rugby World Cup. Hence one of the reasons why South Africa got rid of the Sunwolves. It's the voting isn't always as clear cut as you'd expect. It's not like all Super Rugby countries vote together. No, that's not how that doesn't always work. Anything else you want to unpack from there, or just think?
No, basically, I'm sort of thinking, your takeaway from this is the fact is that once if they go ahead with the executive voting or the voting process that they've got on the table at the moment, if they go through it, the first job of the new lot obviously is going to be around pandemic planning, but they very shortly after that have to look at the whole process and just to do an audit of operations at that highest level in World Rugby, just so that the confidence is restored across the nations, whether it's a tier 1 or tier 3 or nation, and the way that World Rugby operates.
Yeah, so Bill Beaumont has come out and said he'll set up an independent review, i.e., he'll nominate somebody to give him the answers he wants. Sorry, he'll pick someone independent to give answers. Whereas Augustin Pichot has come out and said that he thinks it should be one vote, one country. So we'll see how that all goes. There is on the COVID side of things, World Rugby has put aside approximately $100 million of a relief fund available for unions. So they are stepping up to help unions. Obviously, Australia is one of the first off the ranks. The USA will be one of the first off the ranks, trying to get their mitts on that, as they're still in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and I think Australia are going to be pretty quick to get in there as well, because they've obviously are in financial strife.
I think you've explained this on other shows previously, but just with the USA Rugby and MLR and the tie-up between the two, or non-tie-up between the two, do you want to go over that in terms of just so people understand this? It's like, well, how can MLR talk about still carrying on whilst, as you say, USA Rugby's in Chapter 11?
So Major League Rugby is under is all private investment. The USA Rugby has got no control, whilst it does recognise Major League Rugby. Forgot what the technical term is. It's not accredited, but it gives basically says, yeah, it can go ahead. We think it's a good competition. They don't actually have any financial control of it, and they obviously help with things like referees and blah blah blah, but they're all paid for directly by Major League Rugby. So yeah, Major League Rugby is solvent at the moment. There have been rumours that a couple of the sides might be in trouble, but and I've seen that come up. I'm not, but at the moment that it's only people. It's only Twitter talk. Look, all the players have had their full contracts paid. They're not having to take pay cuts like other leagues are, for example. And they've already announced that they're going to be around next. They will be going around next year, and they are adding 2 teams next year. Now, one team has dropped out, but in the form of the Colorado Raptors, which used to be called the Glendale Raptors, but that was they pulled out because they said they wanted to promote USA players, and that not about having foreign players. Now, one of the things, if you're going to expand your league every year, you've got to create the talent, and so hence that's why the Major Rugby have been brought more foreign players. But yeah, basically, the point is that Major Rugby is financially independent from the USA Rugby. Sanctioned. Thank you, Simon. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh, interesting. And I think I saw a rumor, or I don't know if it's rumor or if it's fact or not, but one D Carter might be headed towards the MLR, which would obviously help in promoting that product in America.
Yes, it would. Now, there one D Carter is rumored to be on $1 million a season. I think it is approximately.
Yep, or something like that. I think
that is approximately twice the salary cap of a Major League Rugby team. So he would have to take a fairly serious pay cut if he wants to go over and play in Major League Rugby. Look,
But you get a job as a marketing manager at one of the companies nearby.
Well,
That pays
maybe
you for some reason some silly amount of money.
there are some question marks around how. So the team they're talking about going to is Rugby United New York. Good evening, Line Break Rugby, who's joined. Great to have Christopher in the live chat. Simon, we've already mentioned a few times as well. Thank you guys for all joining in. So it's being in New York is a draw in itself. Let's be honest. Would him and his wife fancy a year in New York? Perhaps not at the moment under COVID, but we know what I mean. But it's with Broadway and all the other kind of stuff. It's got a certain appeal. Let's be honest. Which I think LA Coast. Actually, no, it's not LA Coast, is it? There is a team in LA, but it's not going to be called that. It's going to be called something else. When that team steps up again, LA will have a certain appeal to it, which someone like Austin might not, for example. And you're probably asking, you're going to tell me that Austin's a fantastic place. So yes, there is a certain amount of appeal from that, and I think that's why some players like Bastereau went over for a season, was more kind of a lifestyle and have a bit of rather than necessarily going over to play some serious rugby and to earn much. But I mean, I was chatting with Dwayne, the Samoan scrum half. I've gone blank as his surname now. You can get that long talk interview here on the New Zealand sports radio. I mean, he signed up for a 3-year deal with Utah Warriors, for example. So look, they're clearly, if they're signing 3-year deals, they've got some proper cash behind them, and they expect to be around. They're not earning money from TV, so it is all coming out of, or most of it's coming out of someone's pocket. They are loss making initially, definitely. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Christopher Macy, I mean, Ben Foden is one of the people that is at Rugby United New York, for example. He does act as, coaching. Yeah, he can be a player coach. That's true. So there are ways around salary caps, as we've seen teams like Saracens try to do in the past.
Ooh, he wants to go down that rabbit hole.
Do you want to get that one? Oh, okay, no. So I think we've got another week basically or so before we hear what's happened with USA Rugby. I think they had a month. It's only had until the end of the month to sort out their Chapter 11. So it'll be interesting to see which way they go with that. Now, one of their creditors obviously is World Rugby, who lent them, I think it was $5 million, just to make sure they didn't go under, and so they could run the Sevens Rugby World Cup. So World Rugby is going to be one of the ones that could decide if they want to shut down USA Rugby, but I wouldn't think they would do.
No. Well, Simon's just basically is the LA Loyal. It's backed by an Australian who tried to set up Global Rapid Rugby franchise in West Sydney. So I'm wondering if that's Twiggy.
No, that's not. No, it's not Twiggy.
Oh, it's not Twiggy.
No,
somebody else. Crikey.
Yeah, Twiggy was working with somebody to have that Western Sydney one. A bit like he's working with a group in China for the Chinese one. He doesn't actually fund that one entirely all himself. Cool. I guess the other news that came out today was that the Crusaders have made some staff redundant. I've been talking to Northland, Tasman, and today I've talked to the Bay of Plenty CEOs. Yep. And so far, thankfully, touch wood, it looks like they're not. The provinces aren't having to go into doing redundancies, but and it was interesting that earlier, about I think it was maybe a week ago, when Crusaders mentioned that they were having to make cuts, that having a larger organisation like they do compared to, say, the Highlanders, when they lose income, it's much bigger. It's much harder for them to tighten their belt and keep everybody. Whereas the Highlanders, with a smaller staff and who run leaner already because they make less income, being a smaller market, they don't have they can perhaps survive it a bit easier. The LA owner has the Austin franchise. You can't have two franchises. Anyway, don't mind, Simon. I'll have to investigate that in a separate one.
So basically, I was quite surprised when I did hear about the Crusaders having to cut staff, because like I was expecting some of the other franchises to start cutting staff before the Crusaders would have to. But as you explained, this is like when you're a larger organization, you have a larger FTE count, then it's going to hit you earlier than the leaner, smaller operations.
It is, but it does seem that like these, and talking to Tasman, they actually made themselves a rainy day fund, and so they can actually survive a year. Now they can't survive 2 years without having to make some serious cuts, but they can survive a year because they have put aside. They've deliberately been putting money aside for a bad situation. Obviously, they didn't know it was going to be COVID-19. Let's be blunt. But they deliberately had a reserve fund. It does. Looking at this, it looks like the Crusaders didn't have a reserve fund. They basically spent everything they got. So yeah, there's definitely some governance issues around that. Just because you're bigger doesn't mean you should have to cut people straight away. You should have some reserve funds. I know there's. Go on.
I have to say, it's an interesting thing that with some of these large organizations, you can understand it with small ones, but some of these large ones, I don't understand the instant cutting that they've had to be going through. We're talking about in New Zealand, not globally, so I can only talk of the New Zealand. Effectively, we've been shut down for 4 weeks. For a sporting organization to all of a sudden run out of funds after being shut down for 4 weeks, that starts be affected by it. It's strange, because it's just like 4 weeks. It's like going over the summer months, and you talk about someone like Tasman who's got a year's worth of reserves if something happens. So they could go a year. You would think that as part of good governance structure, going for a month or 2, maybe 3 at the outside, would be something that you'd be having some sort of reserves for as a contingency for any sort of issue that might arise.
Well, I guess it depends where that month lands, right? And also the fact that look, with the government giving the wage subsidy thing at 12 weeks, it's quite clear. Everyone knew it's quite clear it was going to be longer than 4. It's going to be close to 3 months at least, rather than just 1. So it depends. And if you make your money during the season, which is 5 months, and the other 7 months you normally run lean anyway, if you lose 2 of those 5 months, you're suddenly losing 40% of your income for the year.
Yeah.
So even though it looks like it's 2 months out of 12, and it's so hence it's only a sixth, you actually end up losing 40%, which is like 5 times. Anyway, whatever it is, bigger, much bigger. So hence, so sports like cricket or lawn bowls that have got through their summer season and were starting to. They lost a couple of tournaments towards the end, but they were starting to wind down. Whereas your winter sports,
ramping up,
such as skiing, snowboarding, hadn't even started, had just come through their lean bit, a bit like coming out of hibernation, like a grizzly bear out of hibernation and are about to start eating lots of salmon, suddenly to find there's no salmon run, so they're already skinny, and then that's why they starve, kind of thing. So, but I do agree. I think that a lot of these organisations have run too close to the wire, and I would say that the same about New Zealand businesses as well. If you go see a financial advisor, the standard thing is you should have 3 to 6 months of your salary in cash savings in case you lose your job, and that's what everybody should have. Most people don't, and that's why people are and companies are. I think a lot of companies are over leveraged, and it looks like a lot of these sporting organisations it's Crusaders were running too close to the wire.
And being a bit bloated possibly as well.
Well,
you got to remember, you think about some of the staff that they're going to let go. They're non-essential, for want of a term, rather appropriate in this day at this moment. The leaner organisations don't need them, So by definition, if the leaner organisations are getting by without those extra staff that someone like the Crusaders do have, that's bloat. I mean, there's adding value. Don't get me wrong, there's adding value, but it's also, it's the cream on the top.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, but we do criticise the organisations for not having very good social media, for example, or media output.
So they've got this bloat and they still manage to do social media really crap, and they still manage to sort of do random naming, Team Friday, Thursday naming.
As our friend Ryan would say, yes. I was going to say, yeah. Look, they need the extra social media people. Look how good they're. No, they're not, are they? So. Dear me. I will apologise. We have been a bit all over the place tonight, guys. That probably is due to the fact there isn't much rugby going on, so we're trying to. Stephen, actually, Stephen Society is just going to mute himself anyway. Stay out of the conversation entirely. Love it.
You guys were going so well. I just thought I'd leave you to it. I've just been looking through some old highlights of Northland playing Auckland in the 2001 Mitre 10 Cup. 2001 Mitre 10 Cup. Oh, it's just like
Steve. Just so people that are listening and watching us today, what they don't realise that Steve's got pictures of Rupini on his bedroom ceiling.
Dearie me.
No. In all honesty, I think it's been quite an interesting show. I haven't obviously contributed a lot, but on saying that, listen, I think what we came on to talk about tonight, I think by the sound of things, it's kind of a good result. But I have been just basically doing a little bit of research in and around this guy, John Massey O'Connor, and there is a little bit of history between him and the Fijian Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama. So there is a bit of history between these two. Of course, the Fijian president has endorsed the CEO in the past, John Massey O'Connor in the past. So that's really interesting. Just a quick thing on Tasman as well. They are a very well-funded union. They've got some really, really big backers. I think maybe the difference with them and the Crusaders probably rely on New Zealand Rugby Union support, probably a little bit of money coming through via the broadcasters, and also fans coming through the gates. So I think that's I think those are probably the two major differences, where you kind of look at somebody like Tasman. Listen, they've already signed Mark Talia, the North Harbour winger who's been cutting capers for the Blues at the beginning of the season. So they've obviously decided, you know what, regardless of what's happening around the place, we're going to ensure that we've got a very strong union, if nothing else.
Well, hang on. Well, Tony's view was that there were two wingers that wanted to join Tasman. So let's whether
hang on.
Tony Lewis, the CEO of Tasman.
Hang on, was that? I just saw a pig fly past my window with lights on. And also, again, it comes down to the time of the season. Would Tasman or any of the provinces be taking big gate receipts now? No, because they haven't got any competitions running. They would have had, there'd be club competitions, not provincial competitions. Whereas for Super Rugby, they're expecting a certain amount of cash flow at this time of year because this is when their games are. And they can also project and go, you know what, we're not going to be playing in front of crowds this year. We're not, we're not going to get at all. Sorry.
More importantly, I've just ended up in a fetal position now, thinking: have the Blues actually signed up Mark Talia properly or not?
Well, clearly not.
Well,
to me, it demonstrates a couple of things: the difference between the have-nots and the haves and the have-nots. The unions that probably haven't managed themselves so well. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Harbour being 500k in the red, and that's a bit of a rumour that's been doing the rounds. I do apologise if anybody from Harbour is listening, but that seems to be a common thread from a lot of people up this way. I think that just basically shows that we do have, in this competition, we have haves and we have nots. And I agree with Ashwin's point too. You would hope that the Blues have done their due diligence, because, man alive, he's he's probably the best winger that the Blues have got at the minute.
He's the number one winger. I mean, it's just because you're the number one winger in a tournament doesn't mean that you picked for the All Blacks. But he'd be the number one performing winger in Super Rugby at the moment, or for the New Zealand sides.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if you think about it, obviously sponsors like teams that are doing well. Tasman have been doing well over the last few years. Made the final 3 or 4 times and then won it. So clearly, yeah. If they're not in a good situation at the moment, when are they going to be? I guess is part of it. Whereas North Harbour haven't been in that same boat. They haven't been making finals. They haven't been. But again, it is also down to good stewardship as to actually saying, yeah, no, we're not going to spend that money. We are going to put aside 5% or 10% of our income every year until we have X amount in a relief fund. As well, so it's a bit of it swings and roundabouts. There's 2 things in there, but yes, if Mark Talia leaving North Harbour, you can see he'd be looking around, going, "Hi guys, I'm looking for somewhere who can afford me, please." Because
it's funny, and it's been a show about politics, and it's just like you could imagine the difficult political situation the Blues and say Auckland would be in, saying, "Oh, he's going to leave Harbour. Should Auckland pick him up?" And it's like, oh, there goes Auckland again, poaching all the Harbour players.
Yeah.
Whereas, but then the Blues should be thinking, okay, how do we keep him in our territory? They should have got together with Northland, which Steve would like to hear, wouldn't you?
Well, this is the Blues not working hard enough with their franchise. I know Paul, when he had the Tasman CEO, I think he put that question to the CEO: how hard does Tasman not just work as a union, but do they work hard with the Crusaders franchise for?
Yeah, and they absolutely do. I mean, all of their staff pretty much work either for the Crusaders Academy, which is the Crusaders got 2 academies, one in Canterbury and one in Tasman, and all of the Tasman sort of high performance staff that work on the Tasman Mitre 10 Cup team work essentially in that academy, or they work for the Crusaders. I think that the head coach might also be an assistant coach to the Crusaders or something like that. But they do. They work very much hand in hand. From what he said, had previously been a dysfunctional relationship. So it's something they've worked on over the last few years. Right, guys, we've been running for a long time, and I have got an interesting interview lined up. So we've got some ex Springbok. Warren Brosnia is lined up. So Jonathan O'Connor, you behave. John O'Connor and I will be recording an interview with him in about 20 minutes. So that'll be coming out as part of the Long Talk series as well. So thank you very much, Arsene, for joining me.
Not a problem. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Privilege to see you in the morning.
Yep, and as Stephen says, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning on the New Zealand Sports Radio, we'll be bringing you the Monday, not the Monday, because tomorrow is not a Monday, the morning sports briefing. Jeez, I need another beer.
Bye, everybody.